My name is Richard, and I never thought a funeral could feel like a battlefield. But as I drove to my son Michael's service, that's exactly what it felt like. When I received the call early that morning, informing me that Michael had passed unexpectedly in his sleep at the age of 42, a wave of shock and disbelief washed over me. Michael had always been private, careful about his finances, and meticulous in planning. I thought I knew my son, but that morning, I realized just how little I truly understood about his life, and the world he had created behind closed doors. The funeral home had everything prepared, from the polished coffin to the neatly arranged flowers, but the tension in the air as I entered the chapel was palpable. Family members whispered among themselves, glances were exchanged, and I could sense undercurrents of unease. My ex-wife Jennifer stood in the front row, holding my youngest daughter Emily's hand tightly, tears silently streaming down her face. My eldest daughter, Daniel, was standing beside his wife, Claire, looking calm on the surface, but there was an unmistakable shadow of unease in his eyes. I felt my chest tighten. Something was about to unravel. As the service began, memories of Michael's childhood, teenage years, and adult life were shared. Friends and family recounted stories, some humorous, some touching, all carefully selected to honor him. But even as the officiant spoke words of comfort, my mind kept drifting to the call I had received a week earlier from Michael's lawyer, Ellen Parker, asking me to meet her privately at the funeral home. Her message had seemed urgent but vague, and now I understood why. After the eulogies, Ellen pulled me aside to a quiet room and handed me a folder. Inside was Michael's will, a series of legal documents, letters, and handwritten notes. My hands trembled as I began reading, and the first revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Michael had restructured his entire estate 6 months before his death, allocating millions in ways I could not have predicted. He had intentionally excluded certain family members from key assets, leaving the bulk of his fortune to others who had supported him or whom he trusted, and some of it to charitable causes, but under very specific conditions. Then I saw the note addressed to me, written in his own handwriting. Dad, I know you think you knew me, that you understood my life, my choices, but there are truths you have yet to face, and I want them to be revealed today. My heart raced as I read those words. Michael had not only left me grieving, but he had also orchestrated a revelation that would shake the foundation of our entire family. The first confrontation came quietly. As mourners whispered their condolences, my sister-in-law Karen cornered me near the floral arrangements. Richard, she said, her voice sharp, you had no idea about Michael's offshore accounts, the properties, the trusts. How could you not know? I stood frozen, unable to respond immediately. I had always known Michael was private, but I never imagined the extent of his hidden life. Then Emily, my youngest daughter, approached me hesitantly, her hands trembling as she handed me a folded envelope. Dad, you need to see this, she whispered. Inside was another note from Michael, explaining a series of secret transfers, accounts, and allocations that only someone deeply involved in his life could have known about. Some were rewards for loyalty, others were clearly warnings or lessons for family members who had been absent or untrustworthy. As the day progressed, the funeral evolved into more than just a ceremony. People gathered in clusters, speaking quietly, exchanging glances, and revealing snippets of information that had been hidden for years. My son Daniel, for example, had discovered that Michael had established a foundation with specific rules for transparency and accountability. Claire, Michael's widow, had been handed instructions for distributing certain properties, but only if honesty and integrity were maintained. I realized that Michael had turned his own funeral into a test, a final stage for confronting truths that none of us could avoid. The tension reached a peak during the reading of the will. Ellen Parker began detailing the allocations. Each announcement met with gasps, whispers, and sometimes tears. Some family members discovered they had been completely excluded, while others were left with assets they never expected. Arguments flared quietly, alliances became evident, and hidden grievances came to the surface. I watched as people's true colors were revealed, and it was astonishing how Michael had anticipated every reaction. Then came the most shocking revelation of all. Daniel stood up in front of the gathered family, holding a document in his hands. Michael wanted everyone to understand the consequences of dishonesty, he said, his voice trembling but firm. He explained how the foundation and certain trusts were conditional, designed to test the family's integrity. Anyone attempting to manipulate or hide information would lose their share entirely. The room went silent, the weight of Michael's foresight settling over all of us. I realized that this funeral was not just about grief, it was about accountability, loyalty, and confronting hidden truths. Each interaction, every whispered conversation, revealed the layers of secrecy Michael had carefully managed during his life. Old arguments resurfaced, long-held grudges were confronted, and relationships that had seemed stable were suddenly fragile. I witnessed cousins arguing over previously unknown inheritances, family friends revealing secret affairs, and even old business partners stepping forward to disclose information they had never shared with us. Despite the chaos, there were moments of reconciliation. Tears were shed, apologies whispered, and grudges softened, at least temporarily. Michael had created a situation where honesty was not optional, where avoidance was impossible, and where the family had to confront the consequences of their actions or inactions. Even in death, he had managed to teach lessons about responsibility, loyalty, and integrity. By the end of the day, I felt a mix of exhaustion, grief, and a strange sense of clarity. The funeral, which had begun as a simple goodbye, had transformed into a revelation of the hidden dynamics of our family. Michael had left us millions, yes, but those millions came with lessons, tests, and the final act of guidance from beyond the grave. As I left the chapel that evening, I realized that the legacy of a person is not only in what they leave behind materially, but also in the truths they reveal, the lessons they teach, and the way they challenge those they love to be better, more honest, and more present. Michael had orchestrated a final, unforgettable act, ensuring that even in death, he commanded attention, respect, and accountability. And while the grief remained, the clarity and understanding that emerged from that day would remain with me forever.